Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, here we go. I want you to take a moment, right? I want you to take a moment and think about something. For many people, a hospital is a place where healing begins. But for someone who has just experienced a sexual assault, walking into a hospital can be very difficult. Very, very difficult. When I walked into that hospital, I wasn't walking in feeling safe or hopeful at all. I walked in feeling overwhelmed, confused, and honestly, like the world had suddenly become extremely unfamiliar. In that moment, the people who meet a survivor inside those hospital walls matter more than they may ever realize. Tonight, I want to share my experience from that moment. I want to talk about what it felt like to be a survivor sitting in that hospital room. And that experience taught me, and what that experience taught me about what survivors truly need from the professionals who stand beside them during one of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. Because while protocols matter, procedures matter, documentation matters, human presence, understanding, and the ability to truly see the person in front of you. When I arrived at that hospital after my assault, I was not just physically present. I was in shock. My body was there, but my mind was still trying to understand what had just happened to me. My thoughts were racing. My body felt numb. Everything felt unreal. And when someone is in that state, the smallest interactions can stay with them for years. The tone someone uses, you know, that tone of voice that you use when you walk into that room. The patience someone shows. You have to have a lot of patience. You can't rush them. Whether or not someone truly listens or simply moves through the next step of a process. I remember sitting there and realizing that the way people spoke to me mattered deeply in that moment. Because in that moment, I was not just a patient. I was someone whose sense of safety had just been shattered. One thing survivors often experience after a sexual assault is something people don't talk about. And that is a loss of control. When someone's body has been violated, control is taken away from them in a profound way. So when a survivor arrives at a hospital, one of the most powerful things for professionals can often offer them is a very simple, a sense of agency. Letting them make choices, not you making the choices for them. Letting them move at their own pace. Don't ever rush them. Letting them feel heard. Let them feel heard. Because a lot of times when they don't feel heard, they will not report it. Because every moment where a survivor feels even a small amount of control again helps rebuild something inside them that was taken away. And I truly believe this. In the hospital, you may only see a survivor for a short moment in time. But the way you treat them in that moment can stay with them for the rest of their life. Protocols guide the work, but compassion is what survivors remember. I want to speak honestly for one moment. I know many social workers and advocates care deeply about the people they help. I know this. But sometimes systems move faster than a survivor's emotional ability to process what just happened. Sometimes survivors are asked questions when they are still trying to organize their thoughts. Sometimes procedures feel rushed. We don't want to be rushed. And sometimes survivors leave the hospital feeling the moment pass too quickly. Way too quickly. What survivors often need in that moment is not efficiency. That's not what we need. We and they need compassion that slows the room down. We and they need someone who understands that trauma does not move on a schedule. Sometimes what a survivor needs most is simply someone who can sit with them and say this exactly. You're safe here. Take your time. Take all the time that you need. Those words that I just said matter. After I left the hospital, my healing journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. One of the most important steps in my healing process was finding a therapist. And I want to share something personal about that part of my journey. For a while, I struggled with the idea of therapy. I wasn't sure how to open up. I wasn't sure if anyone would really understand what I had been through. Because a lot of times we're silenced When we even reach out to our friends, family, and loved ones, we're still silenced. But eventually, I found a therapist named Lauren. Working with Lauren changed something for me. For the first time since the assault, I felt like I could speak openly about my experience without feeling judged. I felt seen. I felt heard. And I felt like someone was sitting with me in my healing instead of trying to rush me through it. That relationship mattered deeply because that relationship between a therapist and a survivor cannot feel forced. Healing requires trust. And finding the right therapist is not just about treatment. It's about finding a space where a survivor finally feels safe enough to speak their truth. Trauma does not simply disappear once someone leaves the hospital. And I stand 10 toes down on this. Because what I didn't write in my speech also is that I had wound up having a stroke. And I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I wound up having a stroke because I suppressed it. Because no one wanted to listen. No one cared. I had to be sent to a nursing home and rehab facility. I wasn't reading. I wasn't writing. I wasn't talking. I wasn't walking. I was the youngest person in that nursing home and rehab facility. That health issue that Lauren spoke about earlier was my stroke that she was referring to, but she didn't want to say it. She wanted me to be able to say it on my own. Here I am standing. So for the first time since the assault, I felt like I could speak openly about my experience without feeling judged. I felt seen, I felt heard, and I felt like someone was sitting with me in my healing instead of trying to rush me through it. The relationship mattered deeply because the relationship between a therapist and a survivor cannot feel forced. Healing requires trust. And finding the right therapy is not, again, just about treatment. It's about finding a space where a survivor finally feels safe enough to speak their truth. Trauma does not simply disappear once someone leaves the hospital again. The body matters, so the body remembers. The mind remembers. And sometimes survivors experience waves of emotion long after the initial event. That is why therapy can be so important. But it is also important for survivors to know that it is okay to find the therapist who truly feels right to them. Because when that connection is right, it creates a space where real healing can begin. I want to end with this. Sexual assault takes something from a person that is very difficult to explain. But healing becomes possible when survivors encounter people who treat them with patience, compassion, and respect. That their experience matters. And that they deserve support as they rebuild their sense of safety. So to everyone in this room who works with survivors, I want to say thank you. Because your presence in those moments has the power to transform one of the darkest experiences in someone's life into the beginning of healing. And that work is deeply important. Thank you.